Hello, class! So, for this module on painting, I've brought in a outside artist. Her name is Christine Lyon. She has studied underneath such artists as Sean O'Dell, Christine Wang, James Goebel, Ursula Schneider, and many, many more. And she's going to introduce her painting to you guys. I hope this is inspirational and exciting. And if you have any further questions, Christine and I are always in contact. So you can reach out to Christine. I wish we were doing this live and in person so we could have like a very personal Q&A, but since we're doing this as a recording, I can always just relate back any questions that you guys have for her. So without further ado, here is Christine Lyon.
Hi, and yeah, I'm also open to questions, and I'm sure Yvette can give you my email. And I'm just starting here with a screen share of today is the day, Friday, the 24th today is my thesis exhibition. So I just graduated from my MFA in Fine Arts from CCA. And in lieu of an exhibition, we've had this website, and so I'm going to just keep this open while talking about my work to give you context about what's happening here. And also, Yvette gave me some kind of questions here that I'm going to use as outline. I'm guessing these questions are based on things you've been discussing in class already. So where the practice starts is at the sketchbook. That's where that is a fundamental tool to me, and that is a daily practice, and that includes working for the level of production. It's just the continued practice of doing it. And another thing that's preparatory for me is reading and research. I do a lot of reading from other painters and printmakers. Right now, I've been reading a lot from Philip Guston, and I believe Yvette told me that you guys have looked at Guston in this class. And
we will be in this module. We haven't looked at them yet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And he's a really great writer as well, if you're looking to painters that also write about their process. Another really great critic is Susan Sontag. She writes a lot about photography specifically, so if there's anyone in your class who's interested in that, I highly recommend her. But she also looks into more philosophical arguments about art in general. I also look to a lot of fiction and poetry and music, and that kind of storytelling informs the compositions I'm thinking about. And I think that daily practice is so important, and not beating yourself up about the crap you make. You make so much stuff that never sees the light of day, and I think especially in this era of Instagram and streaming, we expect all of our work to be public, and there's a lot of pressure in that to be presentable to the public. And so I try to keep my tools as cheap as possible, especially at the process part, so that I don't have that anxiety that comes with the preciousness of those materials, and I'm able to be a little looser and a little more relaxed when it comes to just sketching and coming up with ideas. And then some of the artists in my field I look to as an aesthetic influence right now are people like Nicole Eisenman, Julie, I'm going to butcher her name, but it's Julie Tuette Curtis. But I really love her work. Louise Bonnet or Bonet, Christine Wang, who's, as Yvette noted, is someone I studied under, as well as James Goebel. Eric Pera is another professor at CCA I worked under, who has really fantastic, he does a lot more landscape, so he's not as much of a figurative painter, but his color is really beautiful and interesting to me. Eric Mark Sandberg is someone I worked with at art center when I did a few printmaking courses there as a part of their night adult education extension courses, and he has a really beautiful body of work that's very like monster looking figures. Then Sarah Tebow is another person I met out here in the Bay who I feel like our work has a lot of things in common. Shabalala Self is another artist who's really up and coming. She's actually has a contract now with Louis Vuitton on a line of kind of work, or I guess garments based on her patterning. And I took a printmaking class with her that culminated in a animation, like a collaborative animation of our prints in sequence as like a stop motion animation. So that was really great to work with her. Another person I'm thinking is Angela Dufresne, Georgia Elrod, Nikki Maloof. And then even, those are all contemporary painters, but I'm also always thinking about Edward Manet, who was a 19th century painter. I think of Velázquez, who was 17th century, and Rubens, who we have Rubens up here. He was 17th century as well. And they're kind of known for these. This is a Velázquez reclining nude. This is the Rokeby Venus, and this is another piece that I turn to a lot in thinking about my own work and thinking about this kind of reclining, passive, milky white figure that we see throughout the art canon and is kind of in this traditional practice of figure painting and drawing that happens in education, that we kind of rely on these kind of gestures and figures to paint from and draw from, is an interesting investigation to me, and seeing where that tradition comes from and if it's seen as this very heightened discipline. And I think that's a really interesting inquiry of, where that comes from and our desire for this kind of form. And I'm particularly interested in this piece specifically because of this image, which is from the suffragette movement in Europe. In England, this painting was slashed because there was actually a series of attacks against figurative art, specifically female nudes, during the suffragette movement, because women didn't want their bodies to just be looked at. They were sick of it being an object of beauty, and so they set out to destroy all these objects of beauty.
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what the suffragette movement is, Christine, do you mind just defining it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So in England, they were a little bit before us, but in Europe at the time, women were fighting for the right to vote, and that group of women were called suffragettes. And in Europe, it happened a little bit sooner, but then later America followed suit in that kind of tradition and followed kind of those women's example. Mm-hmm. But they went through crazy trauma. They were jailed, they were starved, they were force-fed in jail. It was the woman who slashed this painting endured those kinds of tortures. It was a wild time.
Never a dull moment.
Yeah. And then I was also, because I know you're going to talk mostly about my painting, but I also have a soft sculpture practice where I work with some textiles to make these large pillows. So here's one of these pillows I made, and to give reference, I'm 5'4", and they're a little larger than myself. So they're large pillows, and I've looked a lot to artists like Sarah Lucas, who do these really strange body soft art. But also, oddly enough, Viola Frey, who's actually a sculpture artist, but she makes these large sculptural women that I feel like have a very painterly language. If I can find her images here, they just, in a lot of
Mm.
ways, remind me of painting. And even though I don't use ceramics, I think of her a lot and her color schemes, and also the way that these are huge and the way they take up space was really interesting to me. And that was something I was contemplating in making those large sculptures.
Nice.
And
Do you know if she paints them before or after they're fired?
that's a very good question. I don't know very much about ceramic processes, so I'm not like, the color theory there is even more wild because
Mm-hmm.
it's just, there a lot of it is opposite colors that, so I think it's a combination of both. If I understand correctly, is it's painted and glazed. But the one I have seen one of her works, and it was very glossy. So I imagine that one was entirely glazed
Mm.
because it didn't look like it had paint on it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're huge. I can't even fathom how she makes
Yeah.
them. I mean, they're obviously broken down into sections. Here,
Mm-hmm.
but
Well, we can do more research for our end,
yeah.
and I'll show that off
Let
in
me
the
know.
craft portion. But let's get back to your painting while we still have some time.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I have my other tabs
Oh, no worries.
open. And let me get back to my notes, guiding notes. Um, so the thoughts behind my work, I think that something that I think is often a myth in work is that the ideology comes before the imagery, and that kind of held me up for a long time as I thought, I was just stuck not making anything because I thought, I have to have so much intent behind it first. But a lot of times, just like that daily practice in the sketchbook, you realize things that you have been attracted to, and those patterns emerging, it's kind of like a psychological inquiry of like, why am I liking all these? I've been drawing this one gesture over and over again. Let me investigate that further, and doing research on, what that specific thing means, and just getting obsessed with it a little further after the image is created. But in the past 2 years, I think the imagery I've created, it has really pronounced itself as being about pleasure, but an indicative kind of pleasure. It's kind of where introspection meets solipsism, like kind of this narcissism, but also introspection and grappling with those contradictions. And then also, as I kind of noted before, I'm really interested in this central figure that is this passive, kind of reclining nude female figure that we've seen in art kind of represented and re-represented from the 16th, 15th century on. And that's a lot of why I look at Manet's Olympia too, is I keep going back to her. This is a 19th century painting. So these are things that he's grappling with like nearly 200 years after Velázquez's Venus. Oops. But basically what I love about this painting is there's a bunch of indicative qualities, but also a lot of jokes. I'm trying to pull up a full version of it, but I guess this will be clear enough. I hope. Come on.
Oh, Christine, we're actually about to. I'll cut you
Okay.
off here and then you can put that one together and we'll start off the next video.
Sorry.
No worries. No, fine. Cutting off real quick.
So, I mean, I've been thinking about this painting specifically for a long time.